How can you learn to view your body as a sacred temple? That's today's question. Hi, it's Dr. Mary, and we are diving into the first of my 7 principles of being a well-nourished woman, which is treat your body as a sacred temple. But to do that, first you actually have to view your body as a sacred temple. So I'm going to share one of my favorite quotes with you that really helped me rethink about how I saw my body when I was on my own healing journey years ago. The sacred feminine is the experience of being a woman that is whole, holy, revering the life force that moves through us. That is us. That quote comes from a woman named Jane Hardwood Collins. And I think what she was getting at and what really resonated with me about that quote is the idea that your body is the sacred temple that holds your life force. I think so often, because we're not in our bodies, we're everywhere but our bodies. We're focused on the external world. We sometimes disassociate from our bodies because we're not happy with how they look or how they feel. And so we don't think of them as the vessel that houses our sacred connection with divine, that houses our soul. So I love that quote because to me it really epitomizes being whole and being holy and being complete. And part of that to me, of being a well-nourished woman, is really viewing this sacred body vessel as a temple that houses your soul. Now, like many women, I didn't always view my body as a sacred temple. For most of my life, I did not view my body as a sacred temple. For those of you that know my story, you know that I've suffered with eating disorders, I've suffered with osteopenia, I've suffered with endometriosis, infertility. I've been through quite a journey with my poor body. And there was a turning point, a really pivotal moment along the way that really allowed me to start viewing my body as a sacred temple that houses not only my life force, but life force in general. So I want to tell this story to you in the hopes that it helps you try to come up with your own story, your own connection to your sacred body temple, and see maybe someplace in your life that you have had an experience that, like my experience, was an aha moment for you. That maybe you didn't even realize it at the time. I certainly didn't. It took me a few years from when this experience happened for the light bulb to go off. I'm nothing if not a slow learner, right? But I want to share the story with you so you can better understand where I'm coming from and why I feel so strongly in this first principle of being a well-nourished woman is to not only believe that your body is a sacred temple, but then once you really believe that, to begin to treat it as such. So 3 months before my wedding date, I was diagnosed with endometriosis and told that I would never bear children. I was 21. This news coming from a trusted physician was heartbreaking for me and for my fiance. We'd had the American dream of having, the 2 kids and the dog and the white picket fence and all of those things that in the mid-90s accompanied the American dream in our minds. So fast forward 5 years. I'm 26. I have now had 5 surgeries and 3 rounds of drug-induced menopause for the treatment of my endometriosis. I'm not getting any better. And my body, at age 26, decided to put itself into natural menopause. It was that period of my life. I didn't have a great relationship with my body during all of this time, but when my body went into natural menopause at age 26, I felt like it was a traitor. that it had completely taken away my God-given right to have children, that as a woman, my existence was being called into question because I couldn't have kids. But there were all of these things that were associated with that in my mind as a 26-year-old. And so I went on for about the next decade, really and truly loathing my body. It's what fueled my eating disorder, because that was my way of punishing my body for what I saw as its betrayal. But when I was 35, something happened that changed my relationship with my body in a way that I never, ever would have expected. And it's what ultimately led to this first principle. My father had been diagnosed with multiple myeloma, which is a plasma-based cancer. And when you're diagnosed with a cancer that is in the blood, or in his case the plasma, your prognosis is not very good. There weren't a lot of treatment options. There really still aren't, unfortunately, for that particular kind of cancer. And so knowing that he didn't have probably more than a year or so to live after he was diagnosed, I made the decision to fly down to where he was in Texas and help my mother take care of him for my summer. In academia, I wasn't teaching that summer, so I had a good 3 months where I could go. So I flew down to Texas, and I'd been down there for about a month doing the day-to-day shuttling of my father to chemo and radiation and dialysis and all of the things that were part of his treatment protocol. And one day I started bleeding. And it was very much like a period. Only I was in menopause, remember, and that doesn't happen when you're in menopause. So I didn't know what was going on. I freaked out. My mother freaked out. I flew back home and I went to the doctor, and they ran a bunch of tests, and they said, oh, it's a fluke. Don't worry about it. Go back to Texas, take care of your father. It'll be fine. 28 days later, it happened again. I flew back home, and this time they ran some blood work. So the first time they just done some ultrasounds to make sure, there wasn't any tumor or anything. This time they ran some blood work, and they did my hormone profile. And my doctor sat me down, and she said, this is not possible, but your body has healed itself, and you've come out of menopause. But it's not possible. It's a fluke. Don't get used to it. I was 35 at the time. I'm now 43 and still cycling. So clearly my body did the impossible. So around this time, I got really curious about my menstrual cycles. Because remember, since about age 21, when I was diagnosed formally with endometriosis, they'd suspected it since my entire childhood, but I wasn't formally diagnosed until 21. I had really viewed my body as a traitor, a betrayer. My period was my curse. And all of these weird symbologies that were associated with my menstrual cycle and my connection with my body, and it wasn't good. So at 35, when my periods came back and I healed my body out of menopause, I came across a book by a woman named Anita Diamant, and it's a book called The Red Tent. And if you've never read this book, I really encourage you to do so. It's a novel, but it is set in biblical times, and it talks about a tribe of nomadic people who viewed the woman's body as a sacred temple. And when the women would bleed, they would all bleed together, and they would come into the red tent. And the older woman would pass down the stories of the tribe to the younger woman. And so on, generation after generation after generation. And the body's menstrual cycle was viewed as this sacred, holy, life-giving force that runs through the body of a woman. So I got my periods back. I read this book, and it would take years before I really got it. But for me, that was the start of my aha moment. The start of realizing that my periods are not a curse. My body is not a traitor. It is, in fact, not just the house of my soul, my connection with divine. It is a sacred temple, and I should start to treat it as such. So in the coming weeks, we're going to talk a little bit more about how we do that. How do we treat our body as a sacred temple? But for today, I encourage you to think on your own life's journey thus far. Has there been a moment in your life where you had a glimpse that maybe your body, in all of the things that you may see as flaws, actually is a sacred temple that houses your soul, your ability to give birth to life? Whether you have a child or not, that life force energy. Could your body be a sacred temple? It's Dr. Mary. I hope that serves you and gets you thinking about your own relationship with your body. We'll be back next week to talk about the second principle of being a well-nourished woman, which is getting in touch with your body's natural cycles and rhythms. I'll see you then.